An average of 50,000 cases of child abuse and neglect are reported each year in Arkansas. That's 137 cases reported each day. Our mission is to keep these children and families safe. Do you have what it takes to care, commit, connect?
Arkansas, as in any other state, has a number of families where children and the families are in trouble. The whole purpose of the child welfare system is to step in where parents or custodians are not able to meet the minimal standard that we would expect of a parent or custodian. And there are a lot of families in Arkansas that need a lot of services. The primary, or at least initial objective of the child welfare system is to attempt to maintain the children in the home if that can be done in a way that the children are safely kept in the home. So certainly in the vast majority of cases, if people have this notion that the Department of Human Services is just running around snatching children out of home, that really would not be an accurate picture. There are many times where the agency will intervene with the family. There's no filing of any formal court case. They will deliver services to the family, and there will never be any issue of removal. When children get removed from their homes, they are removed from the only world that they know. And as they progress through the system of foster care, they may be going to new schools, living in different homes. Sometimes they get different places. But the one thing that could be continuous with them is having that caseworker go with them each step of the process.
When I first entered the foster care system, I was really scared. I didn't know anybody, and there were a lot of adults asking me questions, like personal questions, and I didn't really have anyone there that I could talk to. It is kind of easy for you to be disappointed in the caseworkers, especially if you've been moved around to different caseworkers, because then you just think that the system thinks you're just a number.
Through the years in foster care, I've had many family service workers, and I found that the better the service worker was, the better I felt, and how I could have hope that there was something out there better for me. But if I had a caseworker or a family service worker that was bad, it also influenced on how I felt, and it also made me feel bad and sad. Even though I haven't been reunited with my biological family, I have still moved forward and in the process of becoming something greater than what I am now. And this is all thanks to the Department of Human Services and what they've provided for me.
If I were to describe the perfect caseworker, they would be loyal, friendly, caring. They would have to be able to help me through my tough times.
You need to be dedicated to your caseload and be very understanding to where these children are coming from and what they've been through. Because sometimes it can be hard and frustrating when they don't exactly open up to you at first, but if you stick with them and provide for them, then they'll open up and you have a great relationship.
This is a job of high calling. It requires a lot from the caseworker. It can be very difficult work. At the end of the day, it can leave you absolutely frazzled. But at the end of the case, if you get a good outcome for a child and a family, it can be the most fulfilling work that you've ever done.
The three major outcomes of child welfare are safety, permanency, and well-being.
What we look for when we determine the child's safety, we look for, is the child safe in this home? Is there anyone in the home that could be a potential harm or threat to the child? Are there any major objects laying around that the child could get a hold of? Any type of imminent danger is what we look for to determine if that child can remain safe in that home.
Once a child is safe, we have to find a permanent solution for the child, and the family service workers play a big part in that.
Now, permanency does not necessarily mean that the child should remain in that home. We also look for other relatives, anybody that that child is familiar with or has a special type of bond with, to maintain some type of permanency in that child's life.
We also have to be concerned about the overall well-being of the child.
That would include their school, their mental health, their medical, dental, anything that impacts that child overall. We have to look at that. We don't want to just remove a child and remove them from that comfort.
If you're thinking about taking this job, you will see a lot of different things, different families with different backgrounds, a lot of disturbing things, and it takes a committed person to take this job.
Make sure this job is what you really want to do. You cannot take this job very lightly. It is very traumatic at times. There will be a lot of times you will take this home. There will be a lot of sleepless nights. There'll be a lot of early rising to hurry up and get to work so you can immediately begin where you left off. You won't be able to save a child in 8 hours. You won't be able to save a child in 24 hours. It takes a lot of time. It's going to be a lot of dedication. You may experience some stress, high stress level. Sometimes it will be very, very traumatic.
I think there's always a fear when you are removing a child.
Sometimes I could go out to a home and everyone in that home is using methamphetamine.
We sometimes get calls from law enforcement in the middle of the night. They will have responded to a residence for domestic violence.
I've gotten calls at midnight.
You always have to be ready.
From the hotline and had to go to an hospital, which was 2 hours away, because a mother gave birth to a child who was positive for methamphetamine.
Giving a drug screen can be awkward because you're actually in the restroom with them when they are peeing in the cup.
There are some situations when parents are so intoxicated that they can't understand what you're talking to them about.
Some families may have firearms in the home and may try to use those to intimidate you.
I've seen children who have been hit with telephones and belts.
She was covered with bruises from head to toe.
The third day on the job, I assisted on an investigation where a biological
Father was sexually molesting 2 of his daughters.
One child had severe lice.
There was a child there that was so severely burned. The parents actually ran a tub full of hot, scalding water and actually set the baby in the water.
One time I worked with an infant who had a skull fracture on 2 separate occasions.
I've been in homes that have trash.
Clothes, you can't walk.
The parent may have 10 dogs, 10 cats.
Animal feces everywhere.
Roaches.
Holes in the floors.
Ants.
The smell of the feces, the urine.
Mildew, mold. You can smell the mold.
It's very hard to breathe in the home.
It gets really, really bad.
The hardest part of the job is not everybody wants to be helped. And that's hard because as family service workers, it's our job, and we obviously take this job because we want to help people, but when somebody doesn't want to be helped, we have to respect that.
A typical day in DCFS, they're really not a typical day in DCFS.
You go in with an agenda of what you're going to get accomplished that day, and very few days do you get any of that accomplished.
Do I have normal work hours? No. I took this job with the understanding that it's never going to be an 8 to 4 job in social work. It's an adventure, and you just have to be willing to be flexible.
Every day is unpredictable. I can never schedule things to do because I never know what time I'm gonna get off.
There are days whenever you might get an after-hours call because you're on call, or there's visits that last late into the day, parents that don't get off work until later at night, so you have to wait until then to go out and see them. When you remove kids, you usually have to work late so that you can find placement for them, take them to the placement.
When we get a report to the child abuse hotline, we have certain time frames that those investigations need to be initiated. A report is considered initiated when we see the victim child outside the presence of the offender. Reports can be made to the hotline at any time of the day or night.
One of the first things I do is try to make contact with the child at school if it's possible. It's a lot easier to speak to the child at school than it is at home. They're a lot more likely to open up about what might be occurring at the home. So I'll go in, ask for the child with the secretary. They'll put me in a room where I can speak to the child. I try to be personal, ask a little bit about the child, who lives in the home, what are their favorite activities, do they play sports, do they like music? And that allows them to open up a little bit.
You don't ever want a child to feel afraid of you or threatened by you. So when I'm there with them, I always make sure that they understand that they're not in trouble, that I'm not there to try to cause any problems for them, that I'm there to help their family and see if there's anything I can do to help their family.
When interviewing a child, the younger they are, sometimes the more likely they are to talk to you and tell you what's going on. I've found with teenagers, they're a lot more quick to shut down.
When I go out to the school on investigations, when it's in regards to a teenager, sometimes there are a lot of barriers because they know the system, they know the rotation, so a lot of times they may not want to make disclosures. They may have an attitude. They may be rude and disrespectful to you.
Teenagers sometimes will call you names or say hateful or rude things to you. You just have to understand that they don't want to talk to you. They've got other things going on, and most of the time they probably really don't mean it.
I have had positive reactions from teenagers. I've actually had to pick a child up and place him in foster care. And he was in a situation where he was being locked inside a room, was not allowed to leave the room, was not allowed to eat. And he was very thankful that he was gotten out of that situation.
I've got a couple of teenagers who started out in a pretty dire situation, and now they are getting ready to graduate high school and go to college.
When initiating investigations, I oftentimes have to use my personal vehicle. So I have to buy new tires continuously. I have to fill up with gas continuously. There's a lot of wear and tear on the vehicle.
My car, we call it the traveling office. I have a box that I keep stuff, coloring books and crayons and wet wipes and several diapers and little toys and trinkets. And then I have, another box that keeps like resources and applications for different programs and referrals. In this job, you have to be prepared for anything. And in the back of my car, I carry a pair of flip-flops, heels, and rain boots.
Home visits are very important. That's where you gather a lot of your information. And you must be, for lack of a better term, you must be nosy. There are times when we conduct home visits where the parents may not be dressed appropriate, but as a family service worker, we cannot allow that to be a barrier. We still have a job to do, and we must complete that task that we're assigned on that day. You want to ensure that this home is not a danger to the child that's in this home. You want to make sure that there is nothing on the floor or the electric where a child can get injured. You also want to make sure that food is always present. So you have to go ahead and ask the question about opening the cabinets, opening the refrigerator, and making sure that you observe the whole house.
Some of these people might be under the influence of illegal drugs. And for that purpose, will not want you in the home. If that happens, we will call law enforcement to assist us so that we're not in the home in a dangerous situation by ourselves. I've had to call law enforcement in the past when I had suspicions that a family was using and possibly cooking methamphetamines.
Some of the families and parents that I work with have criminal backgrounds. By them having criminal background, their associates or relatives, some of them may even also have criminal background. And that can pose a risk to the family service worker because with that criminal element already present, they don't value the safety of the worker as important. That element is present, they want you to know that it's present, and that is a real risk for the family service worker. So we have to always be aware of that when we go to conduct home visits.
Sometimes you'll go into a situation and the family may not think that the environmental concerns are that of a problem. You have to speak with them and let them know that there is a safety concern and that this problem does need to be fixed, and here are the services that are offered to help fix this problem.
Sometimes going out on a home visit can be intimidating from the minute you pull up because there may be people outside. Usually they're just standing there staring at you, looking at you like, what are you doing here in my neighborhood? When you walk to the door, you never know who's going to be on the other side of the door. When they come out, they could be intimidating. They're usually not happy that you're there, and it can be pretty scary. When I go out to a home and I first meet parents, I let them know up front that we received a report from the hotline and that we don't ever assume that a report is true until we have gotten evidence that the report is true, and I want to make sure that they understand that. Sometimes when I'm at a home, I have to make a quick decision about whether or not a child needs to be removed. Sometimes I'll step out in the front yard, call my supervisor, let her know what's going on, give her all the facts, and then she will support me and help me make a good decision about what needs to happen. Oftentimes when there's a removal, the situation can become very upsetting. The kids can be screaming, hollering, the parents can be emotional, and it's important that everybody involved sees that I am calm so that the kids can see that the person they're going with is calm, and the parents can see that their yelling and screaming is not making me upset.
You cannot take my son. I know people. I'm gonna get your job. Bring him back.
Children almost never want to be removed from their home. Even if the situation is awful, it is very rare that they would be happy to leave their home environment. Those are the people that they know, and they don't want to leave there.
There are some remote areas, rural areas that we serve, and you can be driving and all of a sudden your GPS says to go right, and the next thing you know, the pavement ends and you're on a dirt road, and you keep going and going, and there's stray animals, and the houses don't have numbers on them, or they're numbered really different. And so sometimes it can be kind of intimidating because you really don't know what you're looking for or what you're going to find when you pull up to the home. The frustration that I feel as a worker is, we go into the homes, we assess, and we come together with them deciding what the goals and objectives are going to be, and we set some timelines. And so they're well aware of what's required of them, and you're working and you're providing these referrals, and in your mind you're thinking, yes, we're getting there, and then bam, you might have that one day where they're like, well, I'm not gonna go to counseling anymore, or I don't wanna do this, or this is too hard, and just a lot of excuses, and that can be frustrating because you want them to progress and you want the best for them and their kids.
Doing good till you came out.
I know it's going to be tough, but we discussed what would happen if you didn't comply with the case plan, okay? So I'm here for Isabel.
You don't know difficult.
All right, we're going to go inside and get Isabel. Sometimes when you are in a rural area and you go to remove a child, there's no one around but you, the parent, and the child or children. And when you take that child, the parent can start yelling and screaming and making a scene, and there's really no one around to help you if you needed help, and that can be scary and intimidating.
Isabel, tell him you don't want to go. Hey, Isabel. Hey, you can't take her. She's my daughter. Hey, get back here. Bring her back. You liar.
What you do in those situations is you focus on the child and reassure them that they're going to be okay, that it's safe, that you're there to help them, and try to de-escalate by staying calm and not reacting to what the parent is saying, but staying level-headed.
It is extremely difficult to work with parents that are on drugs because the drug impairs their thinking, and until you can get them to admit that they have a problem and begin to receive help and to stay off the drug, then you can't begin to work with them. There are times when you make a home visit and you will see the child actually taking care of the parent. The parent's maybe not feeling well that day or has used some drugs, not impaired, but not doing well, and the child is trying to help. Parents that have a drug addiction, we will drug test them, and we do that randomly. If they have repeated drug screens, then they're have a drug and alcohol assessment, and then after that assessment is when we see what services that are needed. Sometimes it's inpatient rehab, sometimes it's outpatient, and sometimes it can just be counseling. We can do intensive family services where a counselor will come into the home several times a week, and they will begin to work with the family and counsel in a family setting and begin to teach that parent to take on the mothering roles and for the children to take on their roles. A good caseworker needs a lot of patience. They need to find a way to build a rapport with their family, and they need to meet that family right where they're at and not expect any more than that when you first begin. And then as you begin to know the family and work with them, then you can begin to encourage them to make the steps that are needed for their children to come back home.
When I first took this job, I didn't realize how much care of children would actually be involved. You have to make sure that they're fed, you have to make sure that they don't have head loss, you have to even change diapers sometimes.
And being a male family service worker, there are things on this job that I didn't do prior to coming to this job. I had to learn how to change diapers. As a male, there are a lot of things that you may quote unquote not do, but here you'll learn how to do it.
Depending on the age of the child when they're placed in care, you may need a car seat to place the child in. The child may be dirty. The child may not have any clothes, so you may have to go to a local store and purchase clothes for the child. The child may not have eaten that day, so you have to go and get the child food.
As a family service worker, we're responsible for scheduling the visits with the parents and the children. We have to schedule them around the parent schedule as well as the foster parents and the children's school schedules. We have to provide transportation for the children as well as the parents if they request it. So there's a lot of traveling involved.
It is very difficult for children and parents to leave the visits, and that's very natural. It's a natural response. The children feel like it's almost like they're being removed from their parents all over again. And so a lot of times we'll have young children screaming and kicking and not wanting to leave their parents. So before the visits start, we will explain to the parents, the process, and we will tell them that when they leave, that we will help them as best we can. And a lot of times we just kind of pick the kids up and we just have to walk away with them.
When you're working with parents whose children are in foster care, it's usually not a quick solution to it. You have to assess the family and decide what services they need and begin to provide those services. And it's usually several months before you can begin to see some changes and for the families to accept the changes that you're asking them to do.
The worst thing can happen is something takes place, a child has to be moved, and you haven't properly documented the conversations that you've had with the parents, you hadn't documented your home visits, and now you're telling your supervisor that you need to do a removal. But if we haven't properly documented, then our supervisor cannot follow our train of thought.
Paperwork can be a very tedious process because you have to make sure that it is all accurate. You have to make sure it's very detailed. There are people coming by asking you questions. The phone is constantly ringing. Sometimes there are kids in the office. Sometimes it can be really hard to concentrate.
On average, I will spend 2 to 3 hours preparing for a court hearing. When I'm preparing for my court hearings, I rely on all of the documentation that I have done throughout the case, because in some cases we have contacts with the family 3 or 4 times a week. And so if I can go back through all of my notes in the computer and I can make notes for myself for court the next day, then I'll be able to testify better. And I find that our judges really appreciate the fact that you have very detailed notes.
The hardest thing for me sometimes is when the judge make decisions that that I don't agree with, but I still have to carry out whatever is asked, even though I don't agree with it.
It's very important that you work as a team. And one thing I learned playing Pee Wee League, there's no I in team. And that's what we at DCFS in our office, we We have to work by it because, again, our job is so entailing. It's so many tasks that has to be done in a day that you're not able to complete all of them. But if you have a team, then we can take all of our tasks, all of our placements, all of our court, and we can sit down together and complete all these tasks together. So you have to be able to work with your coworkers and be able to be one that's willing to assist your coworkers.
I think as a new caseworker, it is very hard to not get emotionally involved. And I think it's something that you learn the longer you are with DCFS, to try and detach yourself from your cases. And when I say detach yourself, I mean to separate your feelings from them. You have to stay objective because you have a job to do.
The best advice I can give a person considering this field is to be open-minded, to be willing to look at life through the lens of people that you work with, because everybody comes from different paths, but if you can respect where people are at, you can work with them to make things better.
A family service worker position is not a job that you do for the money. It's not a high-paid job. You have to do this job because you want to help families and help them make changes.
The best part of my job is when we provide the services that has empowered this family, that gives a parent the ability to take care of her children without DCFS involvement. Even when we go to adoption, that's a happy part, because this child will receive permanency, lifelong, with parents that we determine to be good parents for them.
If you like to help people and make a difference in people's lives, there's no better job than working for DCFS.
Once I was assigned a case that had been going on for several months, and I met the mother, and she was not receptive to me at all. She told me that she didn't like me, she didn't like the agency, she didn't like anything about DCFS. And at that point, I told her the only difference between her and I was that she had made one bad decision that I hadn't made. At that point, she looked at me surprisingly and began to work with me after that. She began to do her referrals and do her counseling that she'd been asked to do. She quit using drugs, and in a few months we were able to give her children back to her. After the case had closed, I met her in a store one day, and she tapped me on the shoulder and she said, "Thank you for giving my children back." And I told her, I said, "Thank you for all the hard work you did, because that's what got your children back."
Care, commit, connect. Those are very important in DCFS.
We have to care about the children that we are involved with to ensure that they're safe. We have to care about our families to ensure that we preserve the families if at all possible.
Commit. We must make a commitment to every family that we're going to provide you every service at our disposal to empower you, that you're able to take care of your children, take care of your family without DCFS involvement.
Connect means that I'm going to care about that family, and that I'm going to connect them to the services that they need in order to reunify their family.